How's it going, everybody? Welcome back once again to another deck profile. And finally, after many, many, many months of stalling, testing, frustration, anger, sadness, every emotion that you'd probably see in like a really sad but romantic movie. So basically like a deck building rendition of like The Notebook, but not. Finally, we have my Megacolony deck profile. If you're new to this channel, if you're new to any of my videos, I give a little bit of a disclaimer during the beginning of every one of my Megacolony deck profiles, and it is that I do a lot of talking. Though I put love and care and time and detail into every deck that I build, Megacolony, I just put a little bit of extra love, a little bit of extra care. So I do a lot of talking, a lot of rambling, a lot of over explaining. These deck profiles tend to be very long, so if that's not really your thing, I do apologize. However, if you're really interested in the deck, if you're a fan of the deck, or just maybe have some time to kill, throw it on some background noise, I don't know. I definitely, really enjoy giving these deck profiles out, and I feel bad that this one has just a bit of negativity to it, because I like to talk about this deck from the point of view of somebody who's a big fan of this clan, and I have played it literally since day one, and again, I say this in every single deck profile. I have played this deck since the very first set dropped in English. I ordered it, got all my Hell Spiders, all my Karma Queens, all my Bloody Hercules, and I slammed them into a deck full of that counter-charging stuff that Nova Grappler had. And then slowly, as new stuff came out, I built it, and then soon, finally I had my Master Beetle deck, and then I had Giraffe, and I've played this deck since the very, very, very beginning, and so I put a lot of love into this deck, but that also means that I feel comfortable critiquing it, and I feel comfortable talking about where they kind of had a misstep with this support. Again, I took a very long time to get this deck profile out because I don't like to put anything out there that I don't feel at least a bit confident in or happy with or complacent with, and it was not this deck. It took me a very long time and a lot of testing and changes in the meta and taking breaks and coming back and then taking breaks again, and then I even had a month where a friend of mine and I swapped our clans for a little bit and tested with those individually, and then came with like complete blank knowledge on anything about the deck, and then coming back with our own notes and experiences based off of how the deck worked and what didn't work for us. And I put a lot of love and care into this, and even then I have my insecurities, second thoughts, and issues with how Megacolony was treated during this set. The Raging Tactics in general, maybe this is a bit of a hot take, I don't know, was not a great set. It was kind of like the AT&T bar of like support coverage. Megacolony got garbage, Spike Brothers got pretty much just what they needed, and then Tachikaze just had no limiter, had the most ridiculous grade 3 to come out yet. It was absolutely ridiculous. It's just, God, that card needed to be put to 1, and so now here we are. Megacolony got a brand new mechanic, and I like the idea of the mechanic, but they took a very big misstep. Now, if you don't know what this new mechanic is, or you don't pay a ton of attention to it, generally you have a bunch of cards that have normal costs to what should be normal skills, but they have a bit of a gamble to it, where you send your opponent's top card of their deck to the graveyard, and then depending on that grade, you get an ability. However, this isn't really like Great Nature, where it's like you get ability A or B. With this, you either get an ability or you don't. And that, to me, really screws you over. You have 2 grade 3s, a grade 2, and a grade 1. And only one of the cards in this lineup actually made the cut. And you may hear me over-explain this again, you may hear me talk about it and keep coming back to it, but the reason why none of the cards made the cut was because I don't feel confident, comfortable, or really in any way, shape, or form turned on to the idea of using any cards where it says maybe you'll get the skill and maybe you won't. And that to me is just something worth getting out of the way right now, is that none of the cards that are in that lineup are in this, because I don't feel like any of them at the end of the day are worth it. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the counterparts as we go, but I really should caution that this build is a bit different than my other ones, because obviously it is, in my opinion, my most optimal build. It is a bit off the beaten path. It is a bit different with some of the more cookie cutter, more popular choices, but I am going to go back to some of the other popular choices that I didn't run and talk a bit about those as we go on. So hopefully that doesn't rub anybody the wrong way. I've already ranted enough for 5 minutes, but let's begin the deck profile. So for our starters, we have, of course, our one and only Ant Boy. Looking forward to getting Crime Bug in that inevitable Darkface reboot, so that'll be fun. So our first grade 3 is our main one, and this is for Gunningcoleo. Coleo is a very okay card, layered in with some very okay gamble abilities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the first skill and sort of revolve most of this discussion around that and talk about everything as an afterthought. Because he has 2 gambling abilities that are in no way, shape, or form guaranteed to go off. Some abilities that tend to be more difficult to pull off. And I don't feel like any of these abilities should ever be looked at as anything that is a sure thing. They are icing on the cake to a very simple, basic ability. So on Ride, he gains 5k and a 3rd drive. Then your opponent mills their top card. If that is a grade 3 or higher, he gets quadruple drive and an extra 10k. So a 15k, or 27k quadruple drive is amazing. Best case scenario, that's fantastic. However, we're not looking at him like that. We are looking at him as a triple drive 17k attacker, because I would say 8 or 9 games out of 10, that is pretty much what he's going to be. You are not guaranteed in any way, shape, or form to get off this secondary half of his ability. I don't see it a lot. I don't feel like a lot of builds are going to accommodate it. Most grade 3 lineups are around 8 to 10, a little more, a little less, and I don't feel like they are good ratios to ever bring out this ability. Now, sometimes I get it off consistently. There are games where I get it off twice, and that's fantastic, but it just doesn't happen. So at his core and at his simplest, what is he? He's a triple driver with 17k attack. Fantastic. He gets over, force. He can hit. He's mainly guaranteed to hit. Triple drive adds to your hand. It allows you to flesh out your drive checks, distribute them amongst your rear guards. That's fantastic, but really that is all that he is going to offer you. He has one big flaw. That is the fact that you have to ride him every turn. Once you are unable to ride, that is when this deck completely hits the brakes. Flatlines, can't do anything, nothing. No synergy, nothing else can happen. He is a 12k brick, and that part really sucks. And that's a trend with a couple cards. A lot of cards do operate like that. I'm not a fan of it, and I did have to make some tweaks because the secondary grade 3 that came out, which was Cyclomatooth, did not really cover his back very well. Now, really quick, Cyclomatooth was this grade 3 that had this Vanguard and Rearguard ability where he attacks, Counterbust 1, Soul Bust 1, he gains 10k, your opponent mills their top. If it's a grade 1 or higher, he gains a crit. Neat, fantastic, got that crit pressure, you're not guaranteed to get it. At his core, he is, on his worst of days, a 21k attacker that you just use a Counterblast and Soul Bust to get. Yeah, you thin out your opponent's deck, but these cards do not mill in any frequency or with any resource management or any freedom to mill out your opponent. Now, there are some grind games where absolutely this deck can mill out your opponent. If you're playing Dark Irregulars, Grand Blue, any of the sorts, even some really draw-heavy decks, you can absolutely turtle your way into completely milling out your opponent. Don't play a game thinking that's going to happen. There are very few matchups that will actually let you do that. There are very few decks that are going to just sit around and let you mill them out. If you try to take that approach to it, you're just going to get pummeled. And unfortunately, this deck is tanky and it turtles, but it's not turtly enough to do that consistently. So cards like that don't get run. We don't use them because that mill in itself is not a good enough reason to start running some of these cards that have normal costs to abnormal abilities. So him being your main grade 3 really sucks sometimes. And that's why, you know, I did add some things to spruce that up a little bit. But, you know, at his core, you have to keep that battery going. You have to keep that re-ride momentum going. So you have to put in a lot of grade 3 searches, a lot of draw, a lot of resource pulls, a lot of searching. It's just a card that very much needs a partner in crime, and no pun intended there. But so, you know, hopefully like the next set, like maybe he'll couple up with Darkface pretty well or something to like search him out. But at his core, very solid card, very good at just pulling out resources. It's very simple because essentially you are, as long as you can ride, getting a free 3 drives, a free pull at this ability. Tell you what's not free though is his Soul Blast grade 3 ability, which is not my favorite thing in the entire world. Soul Blast 1 grade 3, your opponent mills their top card. They cannot, for the rest of that turn, call any cards of the same grade that has been milled. So, essentially, it's a guard prevention. You hit a 0, you're golden. You hit a 1, 2 and above, you're screwed. Unless you're playing D-Police, hitting a grade 3 or 2 is just not... This ability completely has completely flatlined. Grade 1s, even so, I still kind of have this oh shit moment when I mill them out. Grade 0s are fantastic, though. I have won games that I had no business winning because of the grade 3 mill, and he couples with Phantom Black very well, because Phantom Black, coupled with this, is a complete no-guard. The only thing that can guard that is a perfect marker, and that's situational. So, I mean, yeah, it's great sometimes on its best of days, but on its worst, you've just Soul Blasted a grade 3 to do absolutely nothing but shorten their deck by a single card. Now... one thing that I wish I could fix about this, you know, obviously, shoulda, woulda, coulda, beggars can't be choosers. I wish they had made this ability more than once per turn, because there are ways to shove grade 3s into the soul that would have made this ability a little hardier. You don't get it, pull the slot again, you earned it, you got another grade 3 into the soul. That would make me feel better, because at least you could save it up and, like, jack 2 of them out and then have more of a chance. But, nope, unfortunately it is once per turn. So, what are you going to do with this guy? You're going to ride him, get your free triple drive, chance the 4th, attack with him first, see what you got in your lineup. Most people aren't going to let him hit because they're not going to chance you critting them, you know, once or twice. And you're going to distribute that to your rear guards, let them benefit off that, and kind of flesh it out from there. That is really, at the core, all this guy does as your main grade 3, which is why I went a little off the beaten path and factored in 2 Machining Spark Hercules. Why? Why Machining Spark Hercules? It comes down to 2 different things. When I was building Coleo and I was at my most frustrated and I was at my worst developmentally with this deck, I would go and play Machining and try to play them. What had me bouncing back and forth was that each of these decks, on their own, independently, played opposite ends of the board. Coleo goes tall, and this is kind of a magic term, but Coleo goes tall, Hercules goes wide. Coleo is a very independent, straightforward, I'm going to beeline for the Vanguard, try to get the most out of it card, while Hercules is, I'm going to boost myself up, but I'm also going to spread the love to my other rear guards and jack down my opponent. And these two play off each other very well because they can rotate in and out of each other. If Coleo is at your disposal first, ride Coleo, build some resources, spread out your rear guards, spread your crits, get your draws, you know, heal up some extra damage you didn't feel like taking or that you maybe counterblasted. Ride into this guy next turn. Now you have a field that is bulky, and then you can send that bulky field to your opponent. And then another big thing is that Hercules has a ton of synergy with the rear guards, and Coleo does not. Coleo has almost 0 synergy aside from triggers. Hercules has all the synergy in the world. Everything appreciates his time. Everything appreciates that he's there. Everything gains off of his ability. We should probably talk about his ability first. So he has 2 abilities. His first one is you can counterblast 2, stand any rear guards you have that are resting, rest any units your opponent has that are standing. All of your opponent's units lose 5k, all of your rear guards gain 5k. You can also take a grade 2 on your field, or grade 2 or lower, put it into the soul, he'll gain 5k times the amount of resting units your opponent has. So he gets very big. And the biggest thing that came from all of this, and came from testing both decks, was that I realized that each build had what the other one lacked. Coleo was very conservative on resources, it was very good at kind of spacing them out, countercharging evenly, and doing all that. Hercules was not. But Coleo lacked any offense, had zero synergy with any of the cards. Kind of just did his own thing. If the rear guards benefited off of it, great. But if they didn't, I mean, so what? I guess like they're just gonna have to do their own thing. Well, Hercules was very heavy on resources, but everything had synergy with this. Everything, and even down to the fact that your opponent's field loses 5k until the next turn, just in itself is a huge benefit. And that's the great thing about this deck is regardless of which one you ride first, even if we only run two of this guy, regardless of which one you ride first, each one can play off of what the other one has left behind. Hercules is heavy, hits hard, spreads the love, gets your rear guards hitting. Coleo, it lets you kind of do the same thing, leaves your opponent in this position where it's like, well, I'm at 3 damage, I'm at 2 damage, do I really want a chance of getting double crits? Do I really want a chance of putting me into like a really bad position? So he pulls guard out of their hand, he can kind of thin out their deck a little bit, and pull on pressure with triggers. And so each one, regardless of what the other one has left behind, leaves something for the other one to benefit off of. And that is the biggest thing, is having 6 decent... We have other ride targets, but having 6 decent main front and center ride targets that can completely play their own game, completely do their own thing, and basically play with the same toys, but just in their own way, the toys being rear guards and like field setup, gives them really good maneuverability within each one of them. And I love this setup. I did it completely on a whim just to see what would happen, and it is the best thing I have done for this deck. I actually highly recommend this. If it is not your speed, you can play them as separate decks, because they do have their own things they can benefit off of and combo off of individually, but this lineup here is fantastic. These guys back each other up really well. The only reason why we're running 2 of this guy is 1 for space for other combo pieces, and 2, the fact that you have so much grade 3 search. And Coleo is ideally your bigger grade 1 your bigger first grade 3 ride target, but you have so much search and draw in this deck and so much resource management that this guy is almost always in my hand, either before or a little bit after my grade 3 ride. So they just combo really well with each other. I've said that a couple times now, but I really can't stress enough how well these two play off of each other just to segue into one another. And then back out again, even. It's just great. Next up, we also have 4 Stag Beetle. So this card is just kind of good for a few reasons. He's an okay grade 3 ride. He's not fantastic, definitely not your ideal, and definitely not, you should not be your go-to, but he's an okay grade 3 ride. He'll manage if you need him to be. He also combos well with each card. He gives you resources. It's 2 free cards from the soul, even though they do come at rest. However, Hercules gives you instant access to those resources. Coleo, not so much. This guy has direct synergy with 2 cards in particular, that being Water Gang and Stealth Millipede. Both of them particularly want to be at rest when they first hit the field. So he has synergy with 2 of your ideal rides. It just has a lot of late game bonuses, allowing you to pull things to the back. Maybe you call out like a Machining Mantis, search for some grade 3s, pull out again Millipede, Water Gang, set up for next turn. He's just set up, and he's really decent setup. But again, you do want to pull the things to the back, because most things you're not going to cash in until later. This is like, oh, I'm playing Vanquisher, and I'm going to wipe out my front row, and then pull things to the front row, and then maybe they'll be able to wipe them out again. They kind of have like a resource management thing they have to go with, but it's just backup. It's just pulling things that you don't have to pull from the deck. And again, resource. You want to make sure that everything that you are doing is somehow going to play into either benefiting you next turn when your stuff gets wiped out, or is going to play along with your Vanguard, or prohibit or like debilitate your opponent. Again, Water Gang's really good in this deck. Kind of, I have my own little discussion about Water Gang, but Water Gang's really good in this deck because you can just camp him for basically getting a +3 to your hand next turn if he doesn't get retired. Millipede is really good because Millipede, if it's at rest, will rest an entire column. Mantis is really good because you can call it out, counterblast 1, search your top 6 for a grade 3, thin out that deck. It's just good stuff no matter what you're pulling out. So I like him a lot. I've been debating on cutting him down to 3 and going 3/3 with these 2. I've yet to test it. I feel like it might be a little clunky because I always really like to have one of these in my hand at all times. So it's just kind of up in the air how that's going to go. I'm sorry, I've been fighting off that cough for the last like 20 minutes. Next and last grade 3 is your 1 Antlion. I only found room for 1 finisher, mainly because this deck kind of has its own push of its own. It doesn't need, it just sort of appreciates the finisher. And we have two, actually, that are really kind of serving the same purpose, and that is Stagger 7 and Antlion. Stagger 7, if you don't know, is this grade 3 where when he attacks, if every unit is at rest, counterblast 1, he'll gain 20k, putting him at 32. Then you can soul blast 2 grade 3s, your opponent discards a card. For this attack, they can only guard with cards that are the same grade as the card they discarded. Very good card. I can make a whole video talking about Stagger 7 and Antlion and the dynamic that I, went through trying to figure out which one I liked more. But it came into the fact that Antlion has one big benefit. He gains a crit. So he's like your waterfall clone, kind of. Soul Blast a grade 3, discard 2 cards, he gains 10k crit, and your opponent cannot cover Sentinels. This is just good for bridging that gap between 4 to 5 damage. These cards have a lot of pressure, a lot of damage. You're doing 3+ drives. You can park all the trigger power over on 1, especially if they're at 4 and you're now swinging with Vanguard. They're going to inevitably perfect guard it. You get a crit, park the crit over to 1, park the power over to him. Now you're pushing with a crit that can kill them. They have to guard that. Now you're pushing with him that can kill them, but now they probably use the Sentinel. It's guard pressure either way, and we only run one. I mean, because if we damage check it, it does suck. But as I've mentioned a couple times now, we have so much grade 3 search, and we have so much draw pressure in this deck. I've had 0 problems getting this one to my hand every game, pretty much, for the most part, when I need it. The only big issue with him is that he doesn't gain a lot of power, and that's kind of where he and Coleo start to conflict a little bit, is because ideally he does his best work when he's with Spark Hercules, because Spark Hercules essentially gives your field plus 10k. Obviously it's -5 on one end, +5 on the other, but so he gains more power, and his power is a little more foreboding when he is working with Hercules. Coleo, it's really just a matter of what triggers you get, what you milled out with his ability. If you milled a grade 0 with his ability, this is great. I would even found that grade 1 mills with him are also pretty neat, because it at least eliminates the gap filling that grade 1s and higher can do with cards like this. People tend to drop a lot of their hand when he starts swinging and he has a lot of power behind him. But yeah, your one Antlion's great. It's really all you need. You could cut one of these for a second one. Again, I haven't tested that out yet, and just the way this deck has been flowing, I really don't feel like personally I need it, but that's your grade 3 lineup. It varies with a lot of builds. Again, Cyclomatooth is the only thing that's really worth running if you don't prefer this lineup. And I talked about him before. The only other thing is Helldemize. Helldemize is a grade 3 with no marker that when you call him, you can stand a rear guard, and then anything that's in the back row column behind him, or in front of him, on your front side of the field, won't stand. He's a cool card, but he's only there to stand Water Gang, and I don't like Water Gang becoming essentially a 3-card engine just to draw 2. I feel like that's too clunky, and it's too much setup to just do one thing when the deck does it just fine by itself in this way. So we'll talk more about Water Gang when we get to him, though. For grade 2s, we have 4 of your Machining Mantis. This guy is pretty much needed in a Coleo build. You want to get your resources to your hand. You want to thin out that deck. You want to get your Coleo rides every single turn. You want to get your finisher, get your resource management card, which is going to be Stag Beetle. You want to get the options to rotate in and out of Coleo and Spark Hercules. He is just an awesome card. On placement, Vanguard or Rearguard, counterblast 1, search your top 6 for a grade 3, add it to your hand. He gains 6k. Very simple card, but very good at the same time. He's just ideal for this deck. And, I feel like he is a product of the times. He's a little slower. He doesn't have as much, oomph as a card, but, I wish they kind of delegated, or, kind of put this back to, a grade 1, but, again, beggars can't be choosers. We then have the problem child, which is Water Gang. So, Water Gang, is a card that I disagree with being something that we need to use, but we also kind of have to use him, and I just begrudgingly do it at this point. Water Gang is a very good card in the surface. When he stands, counterblast 1, put him in the soul, draw 2 cards. You can recycle him. He has great synergy with Hercules. Great synergy with Stag Beetle. You can keep reusing him. Here's the big problem. There are very, very few decks in this game that are going to have a problem removing him. Now, upon looking at a lot of the decks that have removal, a lot of them are front row only. The biggest problem child is going to be Kagero. Kagero, you are barely going to see this guy going off. He's going to get shot off the field almost every single game. I don't like it. I don't like that my biggest draw engine does this. I have just learned to accept that there is one matchup out there that is absolutely going to destroy my draw engine. Now, again, you have Hercules. In Kagero matchups, I do tend to seek out Hercules first so I can get my benefits off of him. But herein lies the problem with that, is that the reason why he is only sort of okay in that scenario is because that is a 3 counterblast maneuver. I don't like that. And again, I'm not about to run something like Hell Demise just to get that factor out, because again, that's a 3-card engine. I need to have access to 3 cards just to get off a draw 2. There are ways you can like maneuver it and kind of like get things to combo off each other, get them both in the soul and call them both out and get one to restand the other and blah, blah, blah. But then there's so much maintenance and so much work behind just doing that the deck kind of loses itself in trying to just do that and then forgets how to do everything else. And it's just, that part drives me nuts. And there's so much work and so much of like a headache behind trying to get this guy to work properly. But thankfully, parking him behind the Vanguard is the safest thing you can do, and he doesn't get touched too terribly often behind that. I'm not saying he won't ever. There are way too many decks out there that are going to be able to just shoot him off the field, but he is your best bet to getting resources, to drawing out your deck, bulking up that hand, turtling the hell out of your defenses, getting all the combo pieces you need. This is how you're going to do it. And most games you will, but again, throwing it out there, there are a couple matchups that are going to just completely throw that off and shoot him off the field. Also, one big thing about Water Gang. Now, I am and will always be an insect enthusiast. I love bugs. There's a big misunderstanding about my boy here that I need to discuss. And it is that, excuse me one moment. It is a misunderstanding that Water Gang is a crab. My boy here is not a crab. He kind of looks like a crab, and I get that. He is actually, in fact, one of these. This is just called a water bug, toe biter. The scientific name for this card is Belostomatidae. They are these giant, awful, mean-ass bugs that basically suck the life out of things that they're killing. Now, if you guys are grossed out by bugs, I apologize, but we're going to get a close look at our friend here. Belostomatidae is probably one of my favorite bugs in my area, at least. And if you can see here, they have a little, like, snorkel up front, so they used to, like, jab into their prey. Their bites hurt, and they are, I think, we're in like the top 5 of the US's most painful insect bites, if not like the world. But I felt like putting that out there, a little bit of an extra bug fact for you guys. Water Gang is not a crab. I don't know why they don't have the same color, and maybe they just felt like it wasn't good. Well, they're kind of similar, right? A little bit, maybe. But yeah, water bug, literally a water bug. Thank you for that PSA. So, our last grade 3 is 2. Megalara Lancer. I actually tried to get a hold of an actual Megalara specimen for this video. They are expensive, so I could not do that right now. But Megalara Lancer is a side grade 2 that fulfills one big purpose, and that's adding, stuff back to the soul. Kind of synergizing a bit with your Stag Beetle, but so I'm sorry, his ability is on attack he will gain 2k for every resting unit resting rear guard that your opponent has. He kind of gets over things by himself. Magic numbers is not the word I'm going to look for. He can reach them with a booster. A little difficult, a little situational. However, his other ability is you can take a card on the field, put it into your soul, and I got the Ronas, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that, it's terrible. Take a card in your rear guard in your field, put it into the soul. Your opponent cannot intercept for the rest of the turn. I put him in for 2 very big reasons. 1, he adds to the soul. I should say 3. 1, he adds the soul. 2, he gains a little bit of power, giving him a little more of a presence than either these two have. You're almost never going to want to attack with this guy. Please don't ever attack with this guy unless you absolutely have to, because he's going to get killed really fast. And this guy only gains about 6k. 15k attacker is okay with a booster, but not fantastic. Also, cards are starting to intercept from weird places. Angel Feathers do it, Alt Mile does it. It's not going to be long before other cards start to integrate weird intercepting measures. Protect 2 is also a big deal. And Nubatama, for example, is a really good one. This card shuts things like that down. Alternate defensive options are going to be your worst enemy, because the one thing that very aggressive decks have that gives you an edge over them is that they aren't as defensive as you can be. That is your big advantage as a protect deck, is that you were able to turtle, and your deck is kind of built around the idea of being able to turtle. Them having any sort of way to out-turtle you is going to be very bad for you, and this is how you get around that. I would like to run 3, but there's no space anymore. I can't bring myself to take out either of these two, and so I kind of had to settle them at 2. But, so, you know, on his best day, he's a 19k attacker. You can expand that with Excel decks, though if Excel decks have any more than, like, 1 or have any more than 2 extra zones, you're kind of in a bad spot. So he gets kind of big. He's very crafty. He's got a cool little ability. I like him. I think he's probably one of my favorite cards, like especially art-wise in this lineup. And yeah, there aren't a lot of other grade 2s to really use. Hiding Killer Leaf is the only one. There's actually 2 I want to talk about. So Hiding Killer Leaf and then Aggro Billbug. Hiding Killer Leaf is this grade 1 where it's kind of +1, soul +1. He gains 10k. Your opponent mills their top card. If it's a grade 1 or higher, you get to draw. That is fantastic on the best of days, but if you don't, you get absolutely nothing. Also, if you get him and a Mantis on your first turn, you kind of have to fight for resources, and it's like, okay, what do I want to get off first? I want to get the 10k so I can make a magic number to get around their Vanguard, or do I want to get this and search? And I almost always want to search, and I also don't want to push myself to 2 damage too early on in the game, so it always left me with this conflict of like, well, what do I want? Especially running it over Water Gang, where Water Gang is, yeah, you have to maneuver around him, but he gets you more, and he's a recyclable thing that you can get every single turn if you're playing smart enough, and you can... it's also lower on cost, because with the amount of Soul Blasting this deck was trying to pull off, it really fought for space. And, you know, Megacolony Lancer is there to help, but it only gives you 1, and that's only so much you can work with per turn. The grade 3s have to go to Antlion and or Coleo, and it was just way too much maneuvering around for just a simple draw that I only may get. And it's the biggest thing about every single one of these cards. It has this weird gambling effect. You are not guaranteed to get them. The only thing you're guaranteed to get is that 10k boost, and I'm sorry, but there are cards that have the same exact cost verbatim, but give you a guaranteed skill, and these cards just don't. So that is the gist of this build, is I only ran things that are at least in some way guaranteed to give you some sort of result. Water Gang is the only exception, but it's only the exception in certain matchups. So, grade 1s. This is a little bit techie, but we got some fun stuff in here. So grade 1s, we have 4 Hornet. He's still rocking it on a successful hit from attacker boost. Search top 6 for a grade 3. If you get one, throw him into your soul, add that card to hand. Fantastic card, very well rounded. He'll probably be replaced by Dorcas when Dorcas comes out, but we'll see. We run 2 Phantom Black. So I did have 3. I had to take out 1 for, I think, my 4th Water Gang, if I'm not mistaken, because you want to see Water Gang as a grade 2 ride more often than not. Also, his use only really comes from one his biggest use only comes from one interaction. So his skill is, on attack, drop a card from your hand. He gains 6k. Your opponent cannot guard with normal units. This just kind of forces your opponent to use triggers to guard, and you want to thin those out, because, I mean, again, there's only 16 triggers in the deck. I mean, there's only 16 options that can guard against this card. Now, obviously, a lot of draw power can pretty much take care of this card, but you still want your attacks, because, especially because they're not going to be, like, as ginormous, to have a little more, I guess, oomph behind them. A little more power, and the 1 discard is fine, but the thing is that there are 2 discarders, right? And we'll talk about this other card in a second, but it's actually going to be Brawny Jerk. Now, if I can find Brawny Jerk in a timely manner here, probably not. Brawny Jerk is the other card you would run in contrast with this, because Brawny Jerk is another discarder. There you are. So Brawny Jerk is this other 8K that has another ability where on placement, Soul Blast 1, he gains 6K, your opponent mills their top card. If it's a grade 1 or higher, you Soul Charge a card. I do not like this card. This card looks great on paper, but it's not fantastic. So, between these two, these cards essentially, in essence, do the same thing. This card, on boost, lets you and your opponent both discard a card to... Well, that's it. You both discard a card. I don't like this. The fact that even though you gain resources, even though that you draw heavily and you can pump up your hand, there is no really good excuse to make both you and your opponent discard, because at the end of the day, you are both minusing off of this. The only time this ever came in handy was when it was really late game and my opponent did not have a lot of cards, and that like extra 5 to 10k made a difference. This card, meanwhile, is always useful. Early, mid to late game, this card is always doing something, always pumping out action, always being useful. And that's what it came down to, because I'd either run one or the other. I couldn't have room for both. And this card, to me, if they have a giant hand, can break down that giant hand and drastically shorten it. And if they, because if they have like a 12-card hand, there's no guarantee that that entire hand is going to be grade 0 units. And maneuvering that around and bringing your opponent to this position where they still are going to sweat to what they have to discard with is what makes cards like this my favorite, because I want to force my opponent into difficult positions regardless of what time the game is in, and I don't want to have to minus myself heavily to do it. This is a discard, but I don't mind paying the discard for this. This is a cost I don't mind paying, rather than just my opponent has to get rid of a card. They might be getting... At this point, we're just trading the worst cards out of our hand, and I don't personally like that. And I also don't personally like the fact that you only gain 6k once, and then you only gamble, you may get your Soul Charge back. The only benefit that ever came from that was you have a chance of Soul Charging a grade 3 and then kicking off Coleo's grade 3 Soul Blast skill early. To me, it just wasn't worth it. Now, I'm not saying that the other card is a bad choice. If you prefer to run it, that's totally up to you, and I have no problem or any grievances with anybody doing that. It's just, between the two, I feel like Phantom Black has the most interaction and the most use out of him, especially with the fact that if you boost with him with Coleo, and Coleo gets his grade 3, grade 0 mill, you can't guard against this, and I adore that to death. We also have 3 Butterfly Officer. Rest her, give a unit plus 10k. At the end of the turn, that unit goes into the soul, you can countercharge 1. I love this card. It's great. It's countercharging. It gives my cards a bit more power. Helps with Antlion. Just a really solid card. And then we have probably the best card in the grade 1 lineup, if not in the deck. That is Stealth Millipede. And good God, this card was hard to get a hold of. Freaking Corona has like every shop running out of their supplies, and oh my God. So Stealth Millipede was a promo we got during the previous set that we finally got in English during Raging Tactics. This card is amazing. So on a successful attack, whether it is a boost or a hit, put him into your soul, countercharge 1. However, if he is resting, if he has left resting on your field, any rearguard in the same column that he is resting in cannot stand. This guy shuts down entire columns, and right now that is a big, big deal in Standard. Excel decks aren't as hurt by it. You can kind of hit like a really important one. Force decks really get annoyed by it. Some Force decks can restand, but you're still debilitating them. And Protect decks, to this date, there aren't a lot of Protect decks that really look at this like, oh, great, yeah, fantastic. Like, I don't mind at all. Causing them to be in a position where they either have to put a lot of resources into like restanding it with like an ability, or recalling over it and completely cleaning house of that ability, or playing around it in any way, shape, or form is irreplaceable, and I love the way this card operates. I would run a 4th if I felt like I had the space for it, but I felt like going 3/3 on your 2 counter charges was a pretty good choice. Not to mention, you have a lot of recyclability with Stag Beetle. I almost said Stagger 7. This card's just amazing. One of my favorites in the entire deck. I think that it is just amazing. It doesn't matter what matchup you have. There is not a single deck out there that is going to appreciate. Now, I'm not saying there's a single deck out there that can't play around it, but no deck on this game right now is going to appreciate you doing that, and I love it. It can make all the difference. Sometimes that one column is all that is standing in the way between you and getting killed, and I love that this card has saved me so many games, and it's so much output and synergy with how this deck works. So fantastic, fantastic, fantastic card. If you can get a hold of them, please use them. Lastly, we have the trigger lineup. Going with the 6/6 lineup, you are free to run 8 crit, 4 draw. This changes quite a bit, and I mean, really, it's just a matter of fact that this is a combo-oriented deck. You want to see your pieces more often, so I do like to run these just because draws are always going to be good and always helpful. You just always want to attain your combo pieces. You always want to get what you need and have what you need on you. You want to have your rides, which is really important with this deck. We talked about that before. You want to get, things like this in your hand. You want to get your water gangs. You want to get your really good defensive triggers and bolster your defense if you're able to. I just don't see a reason not to run this because, I mean, you can even run like 7 and 5. I've been kind of debating on doing that a little bit. Play around with it. It's really personal preference at this point. Mine just happened to include running these guys. So that is the deck profile. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Again, I love Megacolony. I just feel like whenever they do something else with this deck in the future, I genuinely hope that it is something a bit more supportive of this mechanic, because right now there's not a lot of synergy and there really isn't a lot going on, and it kind of bummed me out that there was so little synergy with these cards. So when a new support line comes out, when Darkface hopefully comes out, I really hope that they do some sort of static ability like Isabel had, where it's like, oh hey, every ability that says send 1 card to the top of your opponent's deck now sends 2, because that will at least get you a little more of like an advantage on your opponent. So again, beggars can't be choosers, and we will see in the late future how that will go. So as always, it's been a pleasure. Please stay safe. Please stay indoors, please. And if you are an essential worker, be safe, be careful. And I know it's kind of a battlefield out there right now, especially if you're doing like retail or whatever, but we'll get through it. We're hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel. Things seem to be seizing up a little bit, so we shall see. Until then, guys, I will see you next time. Have a great one. Stay safe.